guys. My name is Alina Sayre. I am the author of The Illuminator's Gift, and it's two sequels, The Illuminator's Test and The Illuminator Rising. And I understand you guys have been reading these books in your class, so your teacher asked me to answer some of your questions and chat with you via video. So I'm looking forward to answering these questions. You guys had some really great things to ask. So we'll just jump in from the top. I'll read your first name if you've asked this question. So the first question is by Maylin and Aaron. And you asked, when did you first want to be a writer or become interested in writing? Which is a great question. I hope some of you are interested in becoming writers when you get older, or maybe are getting started right now. I knew that I first loved writing when I was in 5th grade, when I did not love writing. I loved to read books from the time I could read, which was very early. But I thought writing was hard, it hurt my hand, it was boring, it took time. And it wasn't until 5th grade that I switched to a new writing curriculum, and my teacher had me finish a short story about a rabbit caught in a trap in a blizzard, and I thought, how boring. Is this for real? And so I finished the assignment because I had to, handed it back to my teacher, and stood there while she read it for me. And something really surprising happened while she was reading it, and she started to cry. So I thought, oh no, I'm a terrible writer, she hates it. But what she told me is that the story made her feel real feelings of sadness, even though it was about a pretend rabbit and a pretend blizzard. And that just set off this light bulb in my head, that when you tell a story, you can change the way someone thinks or feels. It's like having a magic wand, and it just changed my world. So after that, I got really interested in writing, and by the time I was about 14, I knew this is what I want to do with my life. I love books more than anything else, and I want to tell stories for the rest of my life. And that may not be everyone's path, but I really, I knew by the time I was very young, this is what I want to do. Question 2 is by Megan, Lucas, and an anonymous questioner, asking what inspired you to write The Illuminator's Gift? That's a very hard question because a novel takes a long time to write. The Illuminator's Gift was a process of about 5 years, and it's kind of an inspiration that came from a lot of places. I know some writers get all their ideas at one time and it's like a book appears in their mind. For me, it was more like watching the stars come out at night. You see one, and then you wait a little bit, and out comes another, and then you can start to see constellations and how they fit together. So for me, The Illuminator's Gift came little by little. One of the first inspirations I can remember when I was 15, I was a camp counselor for a church camp, and I met a little girl in my cabin whose name was Ellie, and she had these blue eyes that were so stunning, and just this really sweet personality. And so I started to think, she would make an interesting character. So I put that memory away in my mental file bank and saved it. And it wasn't until 5 years later that other ideas began to spin together, and suddenly I had the right story to put Ellie in. And 3 books later, we're still going. Question 3 is by Esther and Aaron, and it's, have you written any other books? So that's kind of a 2-part question. I have not written any other published books yet, although I intend to. I have written several other books, both short story projects and full-length novels that are now in what we call the drawer. Sometimes the first book you write is not the best thing you write, and it's up to you to decide, is this something that I feel comfortable sharing with the rest of the world? Do I think this represents well who I am and the best work that I can do? And as I looked back on those earlier book projects that I finished in high school and college, I looked at them and thought, this is not the best work that I can do. This was really fun to write, and it taught me a lot, but it's not representative of my best work now. And so even though it was sad, I put those book projects away in my drawer. I didn't delete them, I saved them for posterity, but it helped me to move on to the project that eventually became The Illuminator's Gift, and hopefully other projects in the future. Great question. Question 4 is by Sydney, Esther, and Sammy, who ask, how did you make up the fantasy names in the book? Are any of the characters named after real people? Very interesting. So a few of the characters are named after people or inspired by names I've heard. I did meet a girl named Jeriel one time, and so I kind of stole her name for the book, changed the spelling a little bit. But fantasy names come from all sorts of places for me. Sometimes the best source is ordinary names. Change the spelling, cut a word in half, and switch things around a little bit. Words from foreign languages can be fun if you know a little bit of maybe Latin or Spanish or whatever language it is you're studying. There's a whole bank of words ready for you in that language. Alternatively, you can make up very bizarre sounding names if you take just the longest word you can find and cut it down into little pieces. A great source for me has been vitamins and medicine bottles. You'll find the longest words you can imagine on the back of those bottles, and if you cut them up, mix around those odd, interesting letters a little bit, you can come up with some really odd and interesting fantasy names. So lots of fun, and one of the big advantages of fantasy over more realistic genres. Okay, question 5 is by an anonymous author who asks approximately how many Vestigia Roii havens are there? And this is a question I can point you to from the book. There's a handy dandy map at the beginning, right there. And there are 7 havens, not including Rinlir. They look like they're flying. So that's a fun little journey through the map there. The next question is by Maylin, who asks, how long before writing The Illuminator's Gift had you developed the world and its history? A great question. So I'd started developing worlds back when I was in high school. I loved to read books like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Chronicles of Narnia, and immerse myself in those fantasy worlds. So by the time I was in high school, I started writing my first fantasy novel. And for this world, I just delved into the world building. I made a map that was almost the size of a wall on a giant piece of butcher paper. I developed a history and a mythology for it. But by the time I reached the end of high school, I realized, like I talked about earlier, that I'd kind of outgrown that story, that it no longer represented my best work. So I was very sad to let go of the story, but the mythology and the history that I developed, some of that became material for Aletheia, the world in which the Illuminator's Gift is set. In addition to that, kind of that constellation idea I was talking about, I picked little bits from here and there. I've always loved ocean and islands, though funny enough, I get seasick on ships. So I use different experiences I'd had while traveling, and different imaginary ideas that came to me from here and there until I had what felt like a believable world. So it was something that kind of developed, and even as the story was in progress, I made changes to the world, adjusted things that would make it easier to tell the story and make it more believable. So it's okay to keep on making changes even when you're in the middle of your writing project. Okay, next question is by Tyler, who asks, did you come up with any characters last minute? If so, who? Very interesting. I don't think any of the characters in the Illuminator's Gift appeared last minute, but my writing style is what is sometimes called pantsing, or organic process. Some writers know in advance exactly how the story is going to be laid out. They have a detailed outline, they know the whole plot, and they prepare it ahead of time, then write the whole thing. For other writers, like me, I'll develop some ideas ahead of time. I'll have kind of a general idea of how the story is going to begin and end, but a lot of it I just discover along the way. It's like finding it out as each chapter unfolds. It's kind of like reading and the excitement of not knowing what's going to happen next. And for me, I like this style because it gives me a lot of freedom to listen to the characters and let them develop on their own. It can be scary sometimes because you don't always know what's going to happen next. It means a lot of editing work when the first draft is done. But it did mean that the characters kept on changing as the draft continued. For example, in an early draft, Vivian was a princess of a distant island, and so I toned that down a few notches, made her the daughter of an important senator. Originally, Ellie's adopted family had 2 nasty children who bullied Ellie, and so I consolidated them into the one character of Ewart. So changes continued to be made right up until the end, but I don't think that any characters completely popped up out of nowhere. Great question. The next question is also by an anonymous writer who asked what inspired the song, which is fascinating. I don't know. I've always been someone who loves music, so that's important to me, and definitely drew inspiration from this book from a lot of different other works, including quite a bit of poetry and some of the Bible, Psalms, etc. And so the idea of a song that kind of sustains and ties the world together, that shows the very essence of what things are, was one of the earliest ideas of this story. And for the actual lyrics, I did draw on some of the important poetry and songs in the Bible, though I deliberately left a lot of spaces of the song blank, so that your own imagination can fill it in. What would a song that ties the world together sound like? Because I don't want to take away the enjoyment of your own imagination. Okay, the next question is by Danielle, who asks, what do you do when you're stuck in your writing? Which is an excellent point that every writer faces at some point. There are a lot of different reasons to be stuck in your writing, and the reason will often shape what I do to get over that stuck place. If I'm having trouble just coming up with an idea, for example, I'm developing a creature for book 4, which is in progress right now, I sometimes will just do a little research to give me some ideas. I'll go on the internet and research some topics that are churning around in my mind, try to get a sense of how I want this creature to feel. Sometimes I'll bounce ideas off of other writers, friends of mine, and get a sense of what they think. But if I face a block that's just like, oh, I don't feel like sitting down to write, I don't know what to say, sometimes the best solution for me is just to walk away from my writing project for a little while. There's a great book called Imagine that talks about how our creativity works in our minds, and that one of the best ways to get new creative ideas is to relax and just get away from your work. I like to go for a walk, sometimes I'll take a nap, drink some coffee, or just change where I'm sitting to work. If I'm sitting in a chair somewhere, I'll move to my desk or go outside, and that change of pace just jogs my mind, helps me to think more clearly, and that helps me get back in the groove most of the time. Danielle's second question asks, how does your faith in Christ influence your writing? And this is kind of an interesting question for me. It's something I know a lot of Christians would answer differently. I would say that my books are fiction written by a Christian, not Christian fiction. And that may sound like it's the same thing. But for me, what that means is that I believe in telling a good story. It's very important to me that the stories I write feel authentic, feel engaging to anyone who picks them up. My faith in Christ will obviously pour over into that. Everyone who writes a story, no one can help expressing what they believe in their words. It will come out naturally. But I never want to tell a story that feels like it's preaching at people or forcing them to listen to a message that they're not ready to hear. Because if you focus too much on getting a message across, kind of the moral of the story, you can very quickly lose the power of the story itself. And I think that kind of negates the whole purpose of storytelling. So I would definitely say I'm a Christian who writes stories, not wanting to kind of preach any message too loudly, but letting the audience become part of the story and discover would they want to find in that story? Wonderful question. And our last question today is from Jojo, who asks, are you planning to write any other series? If so, would Ellie and the crew be in them? Very interesting question. I am finishing up the Voyages of the Legend series with book 4, which I'm hard at work at, handwritten in a journal. But I plan for that to be the end of this series. And I may write some other stories set in this world, but I'm definitely planning to depart from this series in the future and keep writing, but probably writing something else. What exactly, I'm not sure yet. I have a couple of really intriguing ideas that I'm turning around in my head. But who knows what will be next. By the time I finish book 4, we'll see what new adventure calls. But that brings us to the end of our questions, and I just want to thank you for such thoughtful questions. These are really great ideas. It sounds like several of you are asking from personal experience, and I really encourage you to keep up your writing and find your own tips for what works well for you. Go to author events and ask questions, but also explore and practice your own writing and see what comes of that, because there's nothing like practice to make you the best writer you can be. My other favorite tip is just to read as many books as you can, which is fantastic because books are great, but reading will also make you the best writer that you can be. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I wish you all the very best in your own writing. Have a great rest of your day.